Hello there, everyone. I hope you'll understand if I forego my usual intro shtick. Um, I don't think it would be particularly appropriate for this one. Um, yeah, as the title of this would suggest, I'm going to be expanding on one or two thoughts and observations I've had in the aftermath of the terrorist assassination of Joe Cox. Now, for those of you who don't know, I've left an article below from the BBC explaining the full story. Um, But for those who don't know, I'll give you a brief outline. Basically, Jo Cox was a female member of Parliament for a seat in Leeds, which is in the north of England, and on Thursday afternoon she was killed by a right-wing extremist prick called Tom Mayer. She was kicked, stabbed 7 times, shot twice, and unfortunately bled to death before they couldn't do anything for her. They couldn't save her. Um, yeah, and this has quite rightly been one of the few stories in the news of recent days, even overshadowing the football game between England and Wales, which would have been the league story had nothing else happened. Um, Now, the reason I introduced that as quite deliberately as a terrorist assassination is A, because that's what it fucking is. That's an accurate description. And B, one of the first points I wanted to raise was the enormous hypocrisy in the way in which both the British media and I think the media across the Western world treats terrorism when it's done by Muslims and terrorism when it's not, when it's done by anyone else. Now, Tom Mayer, as the name might suggest to you, wasn't a Muslim guy. He was just a white guy. um, and by the way, before anyone says, just to put this out there, right? I've heard some of the fucking right wing cunts try and distance themselves and say, "Oh no, he had nothing to do with us." Blah blah blah. In court today, because he's now been charged with a murder officially, in court he gave his name as "Death to Traitors, Freedom for Britain." That was the name he gave. That's not his real fucking name. His name's Tom Mayer, but that's the name he gave in court. Okay, so this one is very much an extreme right piece of shit. There's no getting away from that, you fucks. Anyway, um, yeah. When if and one of the things, none of the newspapers yesterday, so because this happened on Thursday, so it's then Friday and now Saturday. In Friday's papers, none of the national newspapers used the word terrorist or terror attack or anything like that, or even the word assassination in any of their headlines. Which you might say, okay, well they're waiting for the full story to come out. That's why they're not doing that. Well, they wouldn't do that with Muslims. If this guy had been a Muslim guy, he'd have been called a terrorist straight away, and rightly fucking so, because he would have been a terrorist, right? But because he's not a Muslim, he's a loner. He's just this lone wolf fucking character, and we've seen this before. We saw it with Elliot Rodger. Um, we saw it with Anders Breivik. The reticence to call a non-Muslim terrorist a terrorist, I think, is really rather telling of a certain kind of nasty double standard that exists there, because there's a narrative. Only Muslims can be terrorists, apparently, which I think is rather disgusting. Yeah, and Tom Mays seems a very interesting character. Again, he is an ultra rightist fucking arsehole. Okay, whether they want to accept him as one of theirs or not. He was found with, like I say, he gave his name as "Death to Traitors, Freedom for Britain." He was found with Nazi memorabilia in his house, even though apparently during the actual attack, he shouted "Britain first," which is a tad silly given the fact that the Nazis didn't put Britain first, did they? In fact, they sent the Luftwaffe to bomb us back into the fucking Stone Age. But apparently, the disconnect in this man's mind was enormous, I would say. And that's actually another point I want to make. I don't give a fuck about all the shit about than being mentally ill. I know loads of mentally ill people. Fuck, I'm a mentally ill person. But the vast majority of mentally ill people don't go around fucking killing. The only way in which that can be an excuse, as far as I'm concerned, is if the man was a psychopath, like a genuinely psychotic individual, which clearly he wasn't. He was a relatively well-respected, if quiet, member of his community, who'd lived on his own and functioned for 20 years. He was much older than that. He was 52, I think he was, or is. But his mother, he'd been living alone since his mother had died 20 years ago. So he's been able to function as an adult, living on his own for 20 years. He's not a psychopath. So this bullshit about, oh, he was mentally ill, that's not acceptable. Again, if this were a Muslim guy who'd been found in his house with fucking ISIS material in his house, we would not be saying, oh, well, he was mentally ill, let's just leave him alone, blah, blah, blah. It wouldn't be fucking happening. You know it wouldn't be happening. I know it wouldn't be happening. Anyone who would suggest otherwise is insulting your intelligence enormously. Now, in the aftermath of this, the EU referendum, I presume, if you don't know what that story is, tough shit, okay? Look it up your fucking selves, okay? The EU referendum campaigning was suspended for 2 days. So it was suspended Friday, and I think it will resume tonight, Saturday evening, to give a certain amount of a respectful gap for this to, for the political process to sort of breathe and mourn a slain MP, the first MP that was been killed since 1990. Back in the days when we used to call white people terrorists. Do you remember those days? Because that guy was killed in by Northern Irish terrorists. Anyway, yeah, so they've been suspended for a couple of days, and I think that was right. For the initial obvious reason of allowing the political process to just take a moment to respect a genuinely brilliant member of the political world. And she wasn't just, and this isn't just, oh, because she was killed. She genuinely was. Like, she was one of the actual MPs who gave a shit. Like, before this, she'd worked with Oxfam in places like fucking Afghanistan and all sorts, and been head of policy at Oxfam and all of that, and seemed like and she lived on a fucking houseboat on the Thames, and sometimes they used to commute to the Houses of Commons to Parliament on a little boat, which I think is a lovely piece of British quirkery. I quite like. Is quirkery a word? It is now. So yeah, she seemed, and she was only 41. He was buying 2 kids and a widower. Yeah, so I think it was right to leave that respectful gap. And I think more importantly, going forward, that 2 days or day and a half, whatever, gap, I hope has allowed people to reflect on whether the rhetoric they've been using is conducive to peaceful politics or otherwise, and whether some of that rhetoric needs to change. Now, I'm not going to be doing the obvious of saying, oh, anyone who's pro-Brexit is therefore instantly evil because of this, and because I don't think that's fucking true, and I don't think it's fair. I think both sides of this debate, the Brexit fucking thing, look, before this whole referendum shit kicked off, I didn't think the British political establishment could embarrass or insult the British people any more than they had. And I've been proven very badly wrong. The fear tactics that both sides have used to invoke this sense of, oh, the other side are trying to destroy the country or trying to sell us down the river to Brussels or whatever. It's just a campaign of fear. And that has created a swamp, a morass of hate and toxic otherness, if that makes sense. Like the dehumanizing of your opponents to the point where, you know, who gives a fuck if you kill them, because it's death to traitors, freedom for Britain, and all of that, right? That's so perfectly sums up the point I want to make. That there's no one here that wants to destroy the fucking country, whether you're pro leaving or pro staying or whatever. No one's trying to fucking destroy anything. So don't feed into this madness, this fucking hate machine, okay? The reason I think it's exposed more brutally on the right, and therefore this Tom Mayer thing has happened, is because the right have been pumping this swamp full of swamp water, to continue the slightly weird, not euphemism, what's the word I'm looking for? Analogy. For years, blaming immigrants for fucking everything, blaming Europe for everything. I remember the ultimate example, look, I was talking about this on Twitter with someone, and they were saying, I said, UKIP blame everything on immigrants. And they said, no, that's just try to wave it away as like, that's a cartoonish interpretation of it. But it isn't. I remember when Nigel Farage was late for a fucking event, I think in Cardiff or something, he blamed being late. He blamed basically his lack of professionalism in turning up for an event that he knew weeks in advance he'd have to turn up for. He blamed that on increased traffic because of immigration. Do you know what I mean? Blaming immigrants for everything leads to hateful people like this Tom Mayer fucking cunt to see the other side as, oh well, you're trying to destroy the country because you don't fucking despise immigrants or Muslims like I do. And you see this on the right all the fucking time, and to a degree, unfortunately, on the left. But I think it is more a right problem of dehumanizing the opponent to the point where, fuck it, who cares if they get killed? And that needs to stop. We need to tone down the fucking rhetoric on both sides. We need to tone down the rhetoric and stop pretending for political convenience that the other side are fucking monsters. Because when you pretend that the other side are monsters, it doesn't matter if you act like monsters to them, because it's what they deserve, isn't it? Well, no, it fucking isn't. We're all human beings. We don't want to destroy the fucking country, so let's stop lying, yeah? Let's clear this fucking swamp before it consumes us. Anyway, sorry if I got a bit emotional there. Thank you for listening and watching. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are below. Pip pip.